When your blood sugar is low and then high and low and we're on this roller coaster, you actually pull more from your stress hormones in order to rebalance that blood sugar. So now you can think, okay, every time I send my blood sugar spiraling, I am actually increasing my stress hormones, and think of how many times we're going to do that throughout the day, and we would have no clue.
Could you explain a little bit more of what protein is specifically doing when it comes to balancing our hormones or in glucose, insulin?
Before you even think about setting your alarm 2 hours earlier to work out, make sure you're getting enough sleep or else you're shooting yourself in the foot entirely.
Why do the rest of us, if we are not diabetic, why do we need to know about these hormones? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of For Life, a wellness podcast by Life Seasons. I'm your host, Nikki Wolf, and today is all about hormonal balance for optimal health, especially in the context of women's health and PCOS. And we have one of my favorite returning guests in the building, Vanessa, women's health nutritionist, fertility awareness educator, and functional health coach, but overall a weapon when it comes to finding optimal well-being by balancing your hormones. Welcome back, Vanessa.
Thank you. That was quite the intro. Wow, you're making me feel good.
You're fantastic. I've loved every conversation that we have. And for those of you listening, I would highly encourage checking out episode number 37, 29, 20, where we've kind of done a deep dive into hormones and just helped you understand Hormones 101, optimizing them. And today we're going to dive a little bit more in that. So yeah, I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. Let's get to it.
Awesome. Well, today we wanted to kind of pull apart hormonal imbalance, especially in connection with blood sugar. And, we need to obviously discuss root causes, lifestyle, environmental, genetic factors. But as far as, let's start with understanding hormonal imbalance and where it stems from.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to blood sugar regulation and hormones, and just stress in general, we've got dozens of hormones that operate throughout our bodies when we're talking about our fertility, our stress, our well-being, our overall energy levels. There's so many hormones that we can talk about. But when we're talking specifically about reproductive health and hormonal balance for well-being in general, it is so important that we are having the conversation around blood sugar. And this is something that gets often missed or overlooked. It's not a term that you're hearing very often, unless you're considering it in terms of diabetes or pre-diabetes. It's not really something that we think about proactively. So when it comes to hormonal balance in general, we'll talk a lot today about how your blood sugar impacts your stress hormones, which impacts your reproductive hormones, your overall energy, your sleep quality, your well-being, and then of course your fertility as well.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. And you're so right that blood sugar is never really addressed unless you're a diabetic. There's diabetes in the family. It's not something that we think we all need to know, but let's pull back the layers. I mean, even glucose and insulin, why do the rest of us, if we are not diabetic, why do we need to know about these hormones?
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to blood sugar, it's so important that we're talking about these specific hormones. So what Nikki's talking about is there are hormones that regulate your appetite, your satiety, your cravings, your energy levels, because we all know what it feels like to be tired. Maybe we're underslept, maybe we're hungover or something, and then you just crave sweets all day. Or maybe you're craving some fast food. You want to go through the drive-thru all day. Everyone can think about a certain time in their lives where their feelings have influenced their cravings, the kind of foods that they go for, and their day-to-day habits as well. You might skip your workout because you're feeling kind of low and crummy. So we're not just thinking about it in the context of your physiology and what's going on underneath the hood inside your body. We're also talking about the decisions that you're making day to day. So I think personally in my practice, in the clients that I see, but also just with the friends I have, the aging parents I have, grandparents, it's so important that we're considering this because there are tiny tweaks that we can make to balance these hormones that are very, very, very straightforward, that don't require a lot of planning, a lot of effort, a lot of execution, but there are things that we can put in place and have them sustainably be happening over time that are going to make a world of difference when it comes to your quality of life, also aging appropriately, and then of course the hormone balance that we're talking about. So if you want to be feeling better, you want to be more energetic, maybe you're focusing on your fertility, maybe you're making health and fitness and wellness just general goals for this year, then this is why we want to have this conversation around hormones. You will not be disappointed if you start to focus on rebalancing your hormones from the inside out. You're going to feel amazing.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us think, okay, blood sugar, I only really need to pay attention to that, or the only thing it affects is if I'm feeling lightheaded, dizzy, weak, the color's draining from me. But like you said, it controls so much more. Your mood, your energy levels. Are you irritable? Are you hungry, an hour after you're eating? All of that is influenced by our blood sugar. So it's so important that we can, implement different lifestyle, different food choices that can moderate that, because it's not normal to feel irritable or hungry an hour after eating a meal. And so it's what we're putting into our body, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis can make a difference. Now, what are those different implementations? Nutrition, lifestyle, supplementations. I'd love to break those down on how we can practically impact our blood sugar.
That's a great question. Yeah. So let's kind of go category by category. The biggest movers are going to be your nutrition and lifestyle. There are some smaller things that we can tweak and we can add in, and smaller levers we can pull. But number one, nutrition, lifestyle. And within lifestyle, there's a few things I want to touch on, but let's start with nutrition. So some non-negotiables are going to be getting enough protein at every single meal. You've probably heard people harp on protein, not just for muscle building, but it's huge for your blood sugar balance. So we want to have a balance of the macronutrients, protein, fat, and fiber or carbohydrates. So I don't want you just eating a chicken breast and thinking, okay, great, I'm balancing my blood sugar. We want to have some chicken. We want to have some veggies in there, maybe some rice or sweet potato to round out that meal. You shouldn't be afraid of carbohydrates for your blood sugar. That's often something that people will blow out of proportion, that you have to get rid of all carbs or all sugar in order to balance your blood sugar. And that's just not true. That's actually a problem and a mistake I'll see with a lot of clients. They kind of go too far one direction. They cut out all carbs and all sugar. And then we kind of have to reel them back, because that's not sustainable for basically anybody long term. So having enough protein, enough fiber, enough vegetables, fat at every single meal is going to be huge. And if you just focus on eating whole foods, try to limit the amount that you're eating out or going through the drive-thru or having packaged foods, you're going to do pretty well. Ideally, you will also be having meat and fish as protein sources. But if you are vegetarian or plant-based, you can still get enough protein. It's just going to take a little bit more planning. And you often need to supplement with other forms of protein. So a protein powder, for example, or maybe you need to do some isolated proteins like soy, so tempeh or tofu a couple times a week. But that's going to be one primary mover, is making sure that you have a balanced plate at every single meal. The second thing, and one that I love to kind of debunk, is we don't want you intermittent fasting for too long. So this is going to vary depending on your age and your gender. So if you are someone in their fertile years and you are a woman or you were assigned female at birth, then this is where we want to be a little bit more careful with our intermittent fasting. Our studies show, and the science is showing, that we kind of cap out at about 14 hours overnight. So you don't need to do a 20-hour fast every single day. And usually we're relieved to hear this, because a lot of women are told to intermittent fast for hours on end. And it's sometimes just too much for us. And that's going to be imbalancing our stress hormones, which we'll talk about in a minute. But making sure that we have about a 12 to 14 hour overnight fast is a beautiful place to start. Finish your dinner around 6 or 7, and then you're eating at 8 or 9 the next day. If you are a male or you're postmenopausal, then you can play around with fasting a little bit more. You tend to respond better to it because you don't have that natural fluctuation in your reproductive hormones. But go with how you feel. Go with the energy levels you're feeling, the stress you're feeling. If it's interrupting your sleep or you're thinking about food all day, we probably don't want to be intermittent fasting for that long. So making sure that we have a balanced plate. We're not overdoing it on the intermittent fasting. And then a third one would be making sure that your first meal of the day has at least 30 grams of protein. This is difficult for a lot of people because we love our cereal. We love our pancakes. We love to just grab a muffin and a coffee at Starbucks and continue our day. But this will change your life if you are not already having at least 30 grams of protein. So we're talking 3 eggs with a couple pieces of turkey bacon or a breakfast sausage. You can also make a super hearty smoothie with a protein powder, or you can do a Greek yogurt bowl with some collagen. All of these are great options for breakfast, but eat a bigger breakfast than you think you need. making sure we hit that minimum amount of 30 grams of protein, you will be set up. Like you were saying, Nikki, we get hangry, irritable, frustrated, cranky in between meals, really tired in between meals. All of that is a sign that we are not balancing our blood sugar. And most often we're under eating the protein aspect. So when I have people implement that right away, even if we don't change anything else, they already feel better within a few days because you're giving your body what it needs, and immediately you will be balancing that blood sugar. So those are the first few when it comes to the nutrition. Is there anything you want to point out about nutrition, or do you want me to get into lifestyle next?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you laid it out perfectly. A few things that I kind of took away from that. And one thing that I've been harping on and having conversations about, and you and I even talked about it a little bit before, I think, because you've mentioned intermittent fasting, there's a time or a season based on how we can eat. You know, when I was pregnant, I ate a little bit differently versus when I wake up and I have energy, my stress levels are lower, I'm thriving throughout the day. What I eat can be a little bit different than if I'm experiencing trauma and going through something, a really heavy season. And so like you mentioned, intermittent fasting can be good for an individual at a certain point in life. But if you're listening here and you're trying to get fertile or you're trying to balance out your hormones, chances are intermittent fasting is only going to add more stress to your life, to your body, to your hormones. So we're not necessarily saying it's completely bad. And like you said, you know, for men, their bodies can adapt to it much easier in general because of their hormones, but just really pay attention to how you're feeling. Are you waking up with energy? Are your mood swings all over the place? What does your hunger look like? You know, what is your energy levels, your skin? If you can, you know, rank on a spectrum of 0 to 10 and you're feeling really crappy, chances are that's not a time to do a 20-hour intermittent fast keto high intensity workout. So really becoming aware of what's going on. Your body's fascinating and it tells you what's going on inside. And so I think if we can become more conscious and aware and maybe not so stubborn, because, and I'm telling you, I've done all that stuff. I did intermittent fasting, keto, and I was saying yesterday, I did intermittent fasting and keto when I was in an abusive relationship, not my husband. When I was in an abusive relationship, I was finishing my degree. I was working 2 jobs. One started at 3 a.m. and doing intermittent fasting and keto. And it was like, and then I ended up in the hospital like a few months later. So it's like, really pay attention to what's going on in the body. But with all that being said, I wanted to kind of pull out just for a second protein. And I'm full in agreement. I think it, you know, and there is a lot of controversy. Are we doing too much, too little? I think most people are under eating protein from what I've seen with my clients as well. And could you explain a little bit more of what protein is specifically doing when it comes to balancing our hormones or in glucose, insulin? Is it, you know, modulating that glucose curve? What's actually happening and why protein?
Great question. So when it comes to protein specifically, there are a few points that we'll touch on, but you're exactly right. The sweet spot for protein intake is going to be different from everybody. The vast majority of people, unless you have been tracking it or you're really into the fitness space, maybe you're bodybuilding or you're strength training consistently and it's been top of mind for you, naturally you will undereat it. Typically, because it is so satiating. It is very, very satiating. And we tend to snack on things that aren't protein. We tend to fill our plates with things that aren't protein more often than the protein itself. So just a good kind of general number to hit is 0.8 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, try to aim for about 150 grams of protein. You might sit around 115, 120, and that's still great. Where we can see protein go a little crazy is when people are doing 2 grams of protein for every pound of body weight. That can be a little dramatic. And it's not that more is better. There is a sweet spot that we want to hit because it can be also a lot on your body and it can be a lot just you planning out your meals as well to get enough protein. But I do find vast majority of us will undereat it. When it comes to your blood sugar and your hormonal activity, there's a few things. Number one is you're exactly right. It modulates that blood sugar curve. So say hypothetically, we all had continual glucose monitors on, and this is a beautiful tool that is now accessible to the vast majority, to the general population through companies like Levels and NutriSense, which makes me so excited because then we're not just having this conversation around glucose and blood sugar when we're pre-diabetic or diabetic and it's a necessity. You can have it on. I had mine on a few months ago and I was taking a look at how my breakfast, lunch, and dinner were impacting my glucose. Sometimes I'll have clients do it if they've got the extra money to spend or they're really concerned about their glucose. And what you'll see what happens when you eat protein, either when you start your meal with protein or you have enough in that meal or snack, is that curve is way less dramatic. So essentially what we're looking for when it comes to blood sugar specifically is your post-meal glucose, basically how high that glucose spike is after eating and when it comes back down. If you've got healthy glucose regulation, we don't want to see these crazy peaks and massive valleys all throughout the day. We want you to be pretty even keel with sometimes little bumps when you're eating a meal, you're eating a snack. If you get nervous or you're stressed out, for example, I remember giving a workshop that I was really excited about, but very nervous about. And my glucose spiked a little bit just because your nerves and your stress hormones will increase your glucose. So we do want to see some tiny spikes and valleys throughout the day, but not massive changes. So when you eat that protein first, or you have enough in your meal, you will see that curve is much less dramatic and you typically recover from any type of glucose spike faster and more easily. And this, like you said, Nikki, will have you feel so much better in between meals. So not only is your actual glucose number looking good, which is essential for optimal health, but the way you're going to feel after your meal, you feel energized, you feel calm, cool, collected. You don't feel anxious. You don't feel jittery like we can sometimes get if we have too much sugar and not enough protein, for example. And you're like, good, I feel satiated and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Sometimes we can feel really heavy after meals, very tired, very slow, very sluggish. Sometimes that can happen if we overdo fat, for example, and underdo protein. So when it comes to the blood sugar specifically, that's what's happening. And then another point I love to always hit on when it comes to protein is that don't forget that so many of your hormones are made of protein. They're made of amino acids, which is essentially what protein gets broken down into. So things like your thyroid, things like your follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, these are hormones essential for fertility. They are created and comprised of protein. So that's something that we want to consider as well, not just for the blood sugar, but your hormone balance in general. And then smaller things like your hair is made of protein. So if maybe you're postpartum or you're dealing with hair loss or stress, we also want to make sure you're getting enough protein because that can also be having an impact on more of the vanity metrics like your hair, your skin, your nails, things like that.
Absolutely. And it's funny. I'm in the postpartum season right now, 9 months postpartum, and the baby hairs are real. I have it hidden right now, but there's some it looks so hilarious. But, I think hopefully that gave listeners a better understanding that the necessity of protein. And you mentioned, different options, 3 eggs with, I think you said a cup or a little bit of turkey bacon. What about for those, and I have my response, but I'm curious for you that generally gravitate towards a sweet breakfast. What is it that they can do? Is it something that they should relearn? Is there a way to have a savory breakfast and make that shift? Or are there options for these individuals with sweet cravings in the morning?
Great question. So I find I'm always the approach of we're going to meet you where you're at. If you're someone where it gets you out of bed in the morning to have a sweet breakfast and you love it so much, we're not going to jump you to a breakfast that you hate and you're going to white knuckle through every single morning. However, I do think this is trainable because you can show your body how good it feels to have a savory, high protein, high fat, high fiber breakfast. And because it feels so good, you will usually start to crave that because I was the same. I would love a little sweet treat to start my day. I found it was very comforting. I was a big fruit girl. I was vegetarian for a very long time. So naturally I would have more sweet breakfast and I couldn't imagine starting my day with eggs or plain Greek yogurt unless it was like tons of syrup and things like that in there. So meet yourself where you're at. That's totally fine. But there are a few tweaks that we want to make. Number one, you can still add more protein to a sweet breakfast. There are a couple hacks I love for this, and I use these with clients all the time, kind of as a stepping stone. Number one, collagen protein. Not that collagen is a panacea. Everyone's trying to tell you it's going to cure every ailment you've ever had, but it is a flavorless and odorless way to get protein. So you can put it in almost anything. You won't taste it. You won't smell it. And that's That's pretty powerful. That's awesome. So if you're having a fruit smoothie in the morning, let's round that out a little bit and say, okay, let's opt for some more berries and lower sugar fruits. So that's why I love our raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, cherries, things like that. Amazing. And then try to add a source of protein, whether that's a couple scoops of collagen. You can also do a whey protein if you digest dairy well, or a good quality plant-based protein. Any of those are good. And then we want to add a fat source as well. So avocado, for example, won't make your smoothie bitter or gross, but it'll make it have a really nice texture. Or an almond butter will really enhance the flavor. So there are these small tweaks that we can make to an already sweet breakfast that will round out your blood sugar so you can still have it taste amazing. You can look forward to it if you're a sweet girl in the morning, but it's still good for your blood sugar. It's good for your hormones, and you'll notice it keeps you fuller longer. However, I would say experiment with a savory breakfast and see how you feel, because I will have a client where they are ride or die oatmeal in the morning and they're like, how could you get me to not eat oatmeal? I love my oatmeal. But then we show them how good it feels to have a bit more protein, even if we do oatmeal and a couple eggs on the side, or we add a little collagen into the oatmeal, or we have some Greek yogurt. We just show what some of the benefits of protein can give you. And then they wake up and they'll text me, oh my God, I'm craving eggs this morning. And I'm like, let's celebrate, because this is exciting. That's your body learning to crave things that make it feel good. So if you are more sweet in the morning, that's okay. We can still round out the blood sugar, try to add a source of fat and protein at the minimum 20 grams, but try to get that 30 grams of protein, and then work your way to a savory breakfast if you can. But at the end of the day, if you hate a savory breakfast, that's okay. Don't do it. But try your best to dip your toes in and see if that you can change your taste buds a little, because it will benefit you, and it'll be easier to find food sources that are high fat, high protein when they're savory.
I love that so much. Again, simplifying it and meeting them where they're at. And, if you are that individual that wakes up and just craves that sweet, baby steps, like you said, maybe you have your oatmeal, but can you have some eggs on the side? What can you do to kind of start introducing? I even saw a recipe yesterday. It was oatmeal, but it was a savory oatmeal. So they did kind of medium boiled eggs, and they put some other stuff on top of the oatmeal. And so finding different ways where you can start leaning more towards a protein heavy or even a savory form. But if that's just not for you, there are ways to up the protein intake in those sweet breakfast options. Now, we've discussed blood sugar, insulin. Insulin has a profound impact on our hormone health. And, whether you're type 1, you're type 2, or you don't have any issues with that, insulin is an important hormone to understand, and making sure that we're not creating this insulin resistance. And, I feel like the words insulin resistance and insulin sensitive get confusing, and people kind of just don't really understand it. And I found an easy way to help understand insulin resistance is if you have coffee or caffeine resistance, you constantly, if you're having a cup of coffee, but you constantly need to up the amount of coffee every single day to have this same impact, your body's becoming resistant to the caffeine. And so we don't want to be doing that with insulin, because if we increase the amount of insulin in the body, it can create more inflammation. And yes, we know insulin helps grab the glucose, move it inside the cells, and it helps utilize for energy. But this increase of insulin can have, an impact on hormones. And, there's a sweet spot. I'd love to hear from you more about, understanding insulin and what we can do to help balance it in the body.
Absolutely. So when it comes to insulin, this is a major player hormone in balancing your blood sugar, which in turn is absolutely paramount to your overall well-being. Of course, your body composition, but also things like energy levels, fertility. I know we're going to talk a little bit about PCOS in a little bit, but that's also why we're having so many issues when it comes to conception, people understanding what's going on with their bodies, sometimes unexplained infertility. There are a lot of things that are going on underneath the surface that we want to be proactive about. And one of these simple things is going to be insulin. And if you can be thinking about this almost before you need to, that's where you are going to be setting your body and setting yourself up for success. Future you is going to thank you very much. So when it comes to insulin, really what you need to know is that its main player is impacting the blood sugar. Your body is made to be able to handle sweets, carbohydrate load, sugar load. That's okay. It's not that you can never eat something sweet again. And every now and then it's a natural response. So say I had my glucose monitor on and I was watching my blood sugar and I just ate a spoonful of sugar, or maybe I just ate a full mango, for example. A lot of that is sugar. My body's natural response is to increase my blood sugar. Insulin kind of pours in and says, okay, there's a lot of sugar in this system. Let's make sure that we shuttle it to the right places. Number one, let's put it into a lot of muscle. We're going to talk about building muscle and why that's so important for insulin in a minute. Number two, we're also going to shuttle it into some fat cells as well. That's why sometimes insulin resistance, and I'll explain that as well in a minute, can lead to body fat storage and issues in that arena as well. But we're trying to get it out of the bloodstream. You cannot have a ton of sugar in your bloodstream all the time. So insulin, think of it as the director for saying, like directing traffic, saying, okay, this sugar is going to go here. It's going to go there. It's going to go there. We got to get it out of the bloodstream. Keep the roads clear when it comes to the bloodstream. And so that is natural. That's okay. The problem that we run into is that we are causing those spikes all the time and we do not notice. And a lot of the time it's things that we didn't even realize would spike our blood sugar. So it's having too many carbohydrates or too much sugar. It's having coffee on an empty stomach. Sometimes if you're already overstressed and underslept, like we discussed, if you are predisposed to be having those really high stress levels, your body struggles to balance your blood sugar and utilize that insulin properly. So we're not just talking about eating plain sugar. We're talking about sleep quality. You also cannot balance your blood sugar properly if you are underslept. And so many of us are not getting enough sleep overnight, and we don't realize what's going on when we're chronically underslept and undernourished. So that's the main piece of insulin that we do need to remember. And just think of it as we want to stay sensitive so that the insulin can kind of be a little whisper. We don't want it knocking at the door and then having to bang on the door and kick the door down. We want to make sure it's just a tiny little knock, a little whisper, and we're nice and sensitive to that sound or to that hormone. If we start to get resistant over time, this is where huge problems can happen. Not only body composition and overall the way you're feeling throughout the day, but down the road, infertility problems, deep hormonal imbalances. We can also have issues with memory recall, brain function. We also know it's very closely linked to Alzheimer's, dementia. There's so many things that we want to talk about when it comes to insulin and blood sugar. So keeping that nice and sensitive is going to be important. And we can use the tactics that we're talking about in this episode to make sure that your insulin is staying where it should be.
Fantastic. And, I love the little knock versus like the bang of the knock. Now, in regards to one of the consequences, if you do struggle with insulin resistance, is PCOS, which we've kind of discussed a little bit. I'd love to hear, why is that a consequence when your insulin's out of whack? And what does that look like? And, we've addressed different nutrition advice, but what about lifestyle, exercises? How can we have our part in either reversing that or avoiding it altogether?
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to PCOS, it is becoming so prevalent. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, it is becoming a huge problem. This wasn't even a thing not long ago. It was very rare. And now I think we're climbing to almost 1 in 6. It was 1 in 10 and then 1 in 8. And now it is unbelievable how quickly it's climbing. And now it's almost like a buzzword and people are getting diagnosed left, right, and center. Essentially what's going on is when it comes to PCOS, there are 4 main types. The most common is insulin resistant PCOS, which I'll dive into, but there are a few others. We've got post-pill PCOS. So if you're coming off hormonal birth control and you're having symptoms of PCOS, sometimes that's why. We also have adrenal PCOS, usually linked very closely to stress. And then we have inflammation-based PCOS, and that can be other markers of inflammation. It can also be related to your diet and lifestyle as well. We also want to, of course, consider genetic factors in this, but most of the PCOS that we're experiencing is completely manageable. I know, Nikki, you talk on the podcast a lot about your personal experience, and I love you for that because it's important that people know you're not doomed if you have this diagnosis or if someone's thinking that you have PCOS. There are a lot of things we can do to manage it. So one of the main reasons why we're struggling not only with the insulin resistance, but the PCOS, the infertility problems, all the hormonal issues, is we are overstressed and we do not realize it because they're not conventional types of stress. Because when we think of stress, we think, okay, Am I stressing about finance? Am I stressing because I'm in a bad relationship? Am I stressing because my work is terrible? Am I not sleeping? Those are kind of the main ones we really think about. And though those are definitely large stressors in our lives, we also need to think, what kind of exercise are you doing? A lot of people are doing workouts that are stressing their body out and they have no idea. Also, are you balancing your blood sugar? Are you eating enough food? Are you eating enough protein, fat, fiber? All of these things help to tell your body you're safe, you're good, you're taken care of. And when those things are lacking, our stress response goes through the roof. We also need to balance the blood sugar because when your blood sugar is low and then high and low and we're on this roller coaster, you actually pull more from your stress hormones in order to rebalance that blood sugar. So now you can think, okay, every time I send my blood sugar spiraling, I am actually increasing my stress hormones, and think of how many times we're going to do that throughout the day and we would have no clue. We also are stressing our bodies out by going too long in between meals. We're cutting out a ton of food groups, like I was saying, the carbohydrates or meat, things like that. If your body isn't doing that or doing well with that, we really need to dial that back. So those are just some triggers that are kind of hidden when it comes to the stress. And then other things as well, noise pollution, huge. Things like that are very, very important that we do not think about on a day-to-day basis. So that's just for someone to think, okay, am I dealing with any of those things? Because those are natural stressors that I may not realize are having an impact on me. And then when it comes to the insulin and the stress, we start this feedback loop that leads to PCOS because you're becoming insulin resistant. That is having a cascading effect on your testosterone hormones, on your estrogen, on your luteinizing hormone, all of these fertility hormones that regulate your cycle. And when you're stuck in that feedback loop, it is so hard to break because you're gaining weight from the stress and the insulin resistance. And then that extra weight gain is causing imbalanced hormones with testosterone, inability to ovulate, things like that. And someone will say, oh, just lose weight. And you think, well, I'm trying to lose weight. But it's very, very, very difficult to lose weight when you're stuck in that perpetual loop. We kind of need to dial things back, look at the triggers of the stress, the triggers of the insulin resistance, and then almost reteach the body how to ovulate, how to balance these hormones, how to calm the heck down because you're stuck in such a spiral and a loop of stress. And that can be going on for years before you get a diagnosis.
You know, as you talk about this stuff, I'm 33, almost 34. And everything you say pulls me back to, I would say, starting sophomore year till, 25 or something. I think of myself and no wonder all of these issues happened. And I think for those of us listening who maybe have struggled, and I have shared a lot of my stuff, I've struggled with eating disorders. I had anorexia, bulimia, overeaters. You know, I went through a lot of trauma, a lot of medical trauma, and then abusive relationships and all this stuff. And so I was in fight or flight for so long. And I think about even, right after college, I'd get up I would do a berries boot camp at 5 a.m. on an empty stomach, probably had coffee. And, and this is after just going through years and years of trauma and stress. And no wonder years later, you develop all these issues is because your body is just trying to survive for so long. I remember in high school, I would sneak out. This is getting personal, but whatever. I was, sneaking out of the house at 5 a.m. to do a workout so that my dad wouldn't know my second workout of the day was actually my second workout. I would do abs for breakfast and eat an apple during my second class. No wonder all these issues, your body, and your body's resistant and it can hold on for quite some time. But at some point, it's just going to give out. And so when you get to that spot where you've packed on the weight because it's realizing, okay, you're in starvation, you're, in the Hunger Games, we need to reserve body fat to keep you alive. So now you gain all this weight. And then you get to this point, you're like, okay, I need to undereat. I need to over-exercise and to lose the weight. But you start breaking out. You start getting moody. Everything just goes to shambles. And you're like, what? I don't understand. I can look at a piece of cake and I put on 5 pounds. And so it's just like a cry for help for these women who have dealt with all this stuff. And they're like, everything I do, I'm just putting on weight. And once you make this shift in this understanding, and you make these changes, it's like the weight just falls off. And I remember hearing people say that. And I'm like, okay, that's a load of BS. You know, it's like you can eat more and you can just go do walks instead of a 5 a.m. boot camp and it falls off. Here, I'm here to show you. I mean, you know, I was overweight for some time. I'm 9 months postpartum now, and I'm the leanest I have ever been. I'm the least amount of weight I've been for quite some years. I'm eating more now than ever. I don't have a gym membership. I do move my body every day, but nothing's like a crazy intense workout. I probably work out less than I ever have before because I've balanced my hormones. I wake up with energy. You know, I have vitality. My skin is good, all these different things. And so when you can really understand what you've put your body through, and it's going to take some time to rebalance it, but you know, adding in those carbs, adding in that protein, and really understanding how can we balance our blood sugar. And like you mentioned, a CGM is something so readily available now that we can be conscious of what we're eating. And maybe you don't even have an understanding of what's a carb, what's a protein. Is this enough protein for me? If you wear a CGM, eat what you think is appropriate. Watch your levels because it might look a little bit different for everyone. And so just finding ways to optimize your blood glucose curve, I think is so important. Now, one other thing you did mention before we kind of move on is noise pollution. I just wanted to clarify. Do you mean, you know, it's just different types of stimulation? You know, you're on a walk, you're listening to a podcast, you're listening to an audiobook, you know, there's constant different types of stimulation. Is that what you're referring to when it comes to noise pollution?
Yeah. So in the sense that it's very rare for us to be quiet and silent. When was the last time you went on a walk outside in nature and you weren't listening to a podcast or listening to music or trying to do multiple things at once? Also, there's construction. So I live in Toronto. I live in a big city. Construction everywhere. And there are low grade things. Traffic, sitting in traffic is a stressor. There are small things that our bodies are not accustomed to that when done chronically and consistently, you kind of tune it out, but you don't realize that it is a micro stressor. And that is something that is so uncomfortable to deal with. To try to actually have more peace and quiet in your day sounds lovely. Everyone's like, yeah, that sounds great. I would love to have more peace and quiet. But it feels awkward. You always want music in the background. You want to have a show in the background when you're cooking, when you're on a walk. God forbid you forget your headphones at the workout or at the gym. God forbid you forget your headphones. We are not slowing down and being quiet and being silent and being bored ever anymore. We're always looking at our phones. We're always trying to listen to something, watch something. And exactly like you said, Nikki, a problem that we're all facing is that most of the women in the population that have these issues, they're already trying. They're not going through the drive-through 3 times a day and not caring about their body at all. They are usually working out, trying to eat well. They're trying to sleep. And that's what the problem is they're like, well, I'm already doing everything. So why isn't it working? But it's just that we're doing the wrong things and we are just entirely undereducated about what those stressors are, how you actually do want to ditch the boot camp, go on a morning walk and do some heavy strength training a few times a week. How amazing would that be? And that would probably give you way better results than a Barry's boot camp every day and a run in the afternoon. But we're not taught these basic principles and it almost seems too good to be true. It seems too simple. And sometimes it doesn't seem very real. Saying, go out on a nature walk. You kind of think, okay, yeah, I know that'll make me feel warm and fuzzy inside, but is that really going to do anything? Yes. We have a nature deficiency on top of all these other things. So it's these small little tweaks that are burdening our bodies, our subconscious, our stress. And we honestly don't even realize, but someone's got to say it because it's just getting worse.
Oh, totally. And okay, so you mentioned we're doing this heavy lifting. Let's talk about building muscle and why that's important for our insulin and glucose to be implementing this into our days.
Yes. So building muscle, oh my goodness. If I could have every single person in the world go to the gym in order to build strength, if that is your one goal, lift heavy weight, obviously with good form. You don't want to hurt yourself, but Don't even worry about run on the treadmill for hours on end, go on walks, have general movement, hikes. Obviously, your body is made to move. That's amazing. But in the gym, focus number one on building muscle and strength. We're thinking squats, deadlifts, pressing things over your head, trying to do a chin up. All of these are amazing goals and amazing exercises to be doing. And they're so important, not only for your blood sugar, but your insulin and all your other hormones, because your muscle is a sink for that glucose. So it essentially gives a vast area for all of that extra sugar that's in your bloodstream to be put into. And it's, if we think about all that sugar in the bloodstream, and I was saying insulin is trying to give a place for it to go. If you have no muscle, that's an entire category where insulin is like, well, okay, we don't have any muscle to put it in. Let's shuttle it into the fat cells then, I guess. Or we're going to have to work extra hard to get it out of the bloodstream because there's really nowhere for it to go. When we start to build muscle, your muscle loves absorbing glucose. So that will naturally help you balance your blood sugar, even if you're eating similar foods and you're still eating carbohydrates, you're still eating sugars, of course, to a certain extent. So that's number one. Number two, absolutely essential, not only for body composition, for you to feel good and feel energized, for you to also move properly and not get injured. Muscle is very important because it's going to support our joints. It's going to support healthy aging and good mobility. It's also very, very important for brain health, for memory recall, for functioning. If you feel like you get a lot of brain fog and you're kind of dragging your feet, all of those things are going to be improved by you strength training. It also makes you feel amazing. And it just makes you feel very confident, very energetic, makes you feel sexy in a bikini or in your clothes. And we love that. So it's not just your general well-being and the blood sugar. It's also your overall body composition and aging as well.
Absolutely. And it gives you capability and confidence to be able to accomplish things. It's funny when I'm moving around the house and I have, I would say, a fair amount of muscle compared to most women. I always have. And I think that probably was the root of, backtrack. I used to have severe hypoglycemia and, we looked into kind of what was going on, but my body produced excess insulin. But I also think the amount of muscle mass, my body was absorbing the glucose so quickly. And so, I had to, the more muscle you have, not only the more calories you burn throughout the day, but like we're talking about right now, your body's being able to utilize and grab that glucose. So if you're somebody who doesn't want to let go of those carbs, put on more muscle because like you said, that muscle just craves the glucose. And, there's three main areas it goes to is the liver, your muscles, and then it goes to fat storages, which can expand. And so that's why it's so important is the more muscle we have, the more optimized our liver is, we can avoid putting excess glucose in our fat storages. And, I've kind of gone back and forth, but I used to be not a competitive lifter, but I have a college record for lifting and I used to lift very, very heavy.
Cool.
I don't quite so much anymore. Cause I go through different seasons and I'm actually enjoying running right now. But one thing my naturopath always told me is she goes, no matter what exercise you do you feel depleted afterwards or do you feel energized? And that's something that helps regulate me. Right now, I'm in the season, I never thought I would say this, that I'm enjoying running, but I'm also eating for it. I'm not overdoing it. I host a boot camp at my house every Monday. And so we do a lot of lifting then. And again, lifting is in my DNA practically. But the running kind of gives me that reduce of stimulation. It calms my brain. Cortisol goes down. So it's just being conscious of what you're doing, what your body needs. But ultimately, if you want to move the needle further, weightlifting, that's where it's at. My mom does the boot camp with us. I'm getting her to do some pull-ups. And I think that's pull-ups, push-ups are such an indicator of strength and vitality. And start with the bands. I know we use the Rogue bands, but you wrap it around the bars, you step into it and it's baby steps. Maybe that band almost completely pulls you up, but just getting in the habit of pulling those up. I do a few hundred push-ups every day, just randomly. Like before we started recording, I just dropped down, did some push-ups, or I'll just do them randomly. Finding opportunities where we can build muscle. You don't have to be a meathead. You don't have to, there's ways of doing this that we can just, like the breakfast. If you like your sweet breakfast, but you can introduce an egg, what are different ways we can do this with muscle building, where we can just slowly start introducing these into our day? And that might be 10 push-ups a day on your knees. Can you start doing that? Can you start making these implementations? And again, I keep pulling these back to past conversations, but I think we live in a world now where we crave so much comfort. And I think that is a root of all these health conditions, because we want the lazy boy of life, and no wonder we're having all these health issues, because we want food delivered. We want the comfortable car. We don't want to walk anymore. We don't want to work for things anymore. Well, there's going to be some negative consequences, or some consequences that come about that. And so something that I've tried to adapt is, finding ways to challenge myself every day, learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And that might be through physical things, but that's also emotional. When anxiety comes up, instead of pushing it away, which actually creates more resistance, which creates suffering, is just letting it be, like being comfortable with it being in the room. And I think that's just something that our society has gone away with. And I think, cultures right now, it's all about comfort. It's all about I want, what's the easiest way of doing things? You look at maybe some of the poorest people in the world, they're probably the healthiest in some aspects, because they have, you look at farmers, you look at third world countries, they're moving their bodies. Look at the, chronic diseases. It's probably significantly less in some areas because they're moving their bodies. They have to work for things. They don't have the convenience of comfort. And so I don't know. I guess my takeaway of this is just learning to embrace challenges a little bit more, seek them out. When something there's a little bit of resistance happening, sit in that and let it be for a little bit. Because I think if you can continue to do this day in and day out, you're going to start seeing the fruits of all that work start to show up.
Yeah. Something I would add to that too is when you're doing the work and you're cognizant of, okay, I know I have to make change. We want to make sure you're doing the right things that are going to give you the right results, or else you're going to burn out. You're going to run yourself into the ground. And a lot of us try to do too much at once. We cut out all these food groups. We go to the classes. We either go too far in the stressful direction, or exactly like you said, we're like, meh, it seems like a lot of effort. I'm kind of just going to stay here. So that's why I really like to think about it in a routine-based approach. If you can go on a walk outside every day, even if you still listen to a podcast, whatever. I'm not saying you have to go on a walk and only meditate and look at the birds, but get outside once a day. Even if it's the dead of winter right now, try to still get outside, move your body a little bit. You are literally made to move. If you can't get outside, walk around your home, put your dishes away, get a treadmill, whatever you can do. Strength train 2 to 3 times a week. Try for a full body approach. Like you said, have the goal of doing a push-up, a chin-up. Start to feel empowered in your body, focusing on strength and muscle building. All of those things are amazing approaches. And if you do like to do circuit-based training or a class, that's fine. Just try to maybe limit that to 1 to 2 times a week so that you're not overdoing the stress. And I love what you said about the stress. Is your workout overstressing you, or is it helping to de-stress? We never want our exercise to be adding to our stress bucket. We want your exercise to help you metabolize that stress. You should feel accomplished and almost calmer after your workout, unless you were really hitting it and you were going for maybe a personal best or something. But usually we end up feeling very anxious and almost high after our workouts, not in a good way, not in that kind of runner's high, but in an hour-long spin class or a crazy boot camp, you're almost too amped up, and that's actually depleting your resources further. So if you're someone where you've identified with a lot of the stuff that we've been saying, get outside, go on your walks, 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Before you even think about setting your alarm 2 hours earlier to work out, make sure you're getting enough sleep, or else you're shooting yourself in the foot entirely. And then that's making it harder for you to balance your blood sugar and make good food decisions. And the list goes on. 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep, get on a walk outside or move your body in some natural way, hike, whatever you want to do. Strength train a few times a week, or insert your favorite type of exercise, whatever season you're in right now. But strength training if you want to build that muscle and you want to metabolize that stress. And then try to eat full breakfast, full lunch, full dinner, some snacks in there if you're extra hungry. Focus on the protein and the whole foods. And I'm telling you, that'll get you 90% there. Just those areas, you will be blown away what you can accomplish in 6 months or 3 months, even if you just stick to that. And it's not sexy. It's not trendy. It's hard work. It's consistency. It's habit building. It's having the discipline to follow through, but it will get you the results, and you won't feel like you're running yourself into the ground trying 1,000 things at once that aren't working.
So beautifully said. And, it's this spectrum of where you're at. We want it to be, you got to put in some effort, but if you're at the part where you're, work is crazy, you're not sleeping enough, all that stuff, you got to find where you are in that spectrum and implement different things dependent on where you are. I had a client who was just so overworked, so depleted, many kids, and she was trying to wake up early, cut more of her sleep to fit in a workout because she wanted to lose weight. But like you said, we got to be aware of what's going on in this season of life. Are you already depleted? If we're pulling more from the sleep, that's only going to move the needle back further. And so really being conscious, okay, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough calories, enough macronutrients? Is my life somewhat reduced in stress? If we can check all those boxes, then maybe we can up our workouts or, push ourselves a little bit more. But being conscious and really laying out your life and your stress levels, figuring out where you are in that spectrum and what your body needs at that moment. But, I so love having you on this show. And, if you're listening and you want to know more, you can find Vanessa on her socials, her website, and we'll have you share those in a second. But she really pulls back the layers of hormones. And I just love that you meet you where you're at. There are changes to be had, especially if you're not feeling optimally, because I think we are all built to have the ability to feel optimal. I firmly believe despite your circumstance, despite your diagnosis, your hurdles, any setbacks, we have the ability to thrive. I've been in the hospital. I've been paralyzed. I have a hole in my heart, abusive, all these different things, but I'm not going to let that stand in the way of me feeling my best no matter what season I'm in. So we all have what it takes to move forward. We got to grit down. We have to ask for help, do all these different things. But if you're listening and you are looking to optimize your well-being, your hormones, I highly recommend listening and following over Vanessa at her socials. Do you mind sharing where people can find more of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find everything at Root and Remedy Wellness, Root as in root cause, ROOT, and Remedy as in solution, wellness, rootandremedywellness.com. We're Root and Remedy Wellness on TikTok, on Instagram. Instagram is where I'm most active for sure. And that's where you can connect with me, DM me, we can have a conversation. You're exactly right. It's so important if you are feeling lost to find someone that will meet you where you at or where you're at, is not just going to kick your butt and force you to go way too hard, way too fast, and not have it be sustainable. That is the biggest problem that we have in the health and wellness world. So slow and steady really does win the race, and it gets you there faster, even though it sounds the opposite. And it is really special to be able to have somebody to walk you through. So if you're in that place, I completely understand. We've all been there. We all need guides and coaches and things like that sometimes. So there's no shame in that. We just want to make sure that you're going to make the right changes to get you where you want to be. So that's where you can contact me. Thanks, Nikki.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. And I look forward to future conversations, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Me too. Bye, guys.